Jungkook stormed out of the club, his heart pounding. He needed air. He needed to breathe. But before he could get far, a strong hand grabbed his wrist. "Let me go, Taehyung," Jungkook said, voice shaky. Taehyung didn't loosen his grip. His jaw was tight, his eyes dark with something Jungkook couldn't read. "You think I'm just going to stand there while some asshole puts his hands on you?" Jungkook yanked his wrist free. "You don't own me." Taehyung's chest rose and fell heavily. "I never said I did." "Then stop acting like a." Jungkook's voice cracked. "I can't do this, Taehyung. I can't be some possession for you to protect when it's convenient for you." Taehyung's lips parted slightly, like he wanted to say something. But Jungkook wasn't done. "You don't get to show up, punch a guy, and think that makes you my hero." Jungkook exhaled sharply. "You don't even know what you want from me." Taehyung took a step closer. "I want you." Jungkook's breath caught. "Not just for a night," Taehyung continued, voice raw. "Not just in my bed. I want you." Jungkook looked away, fists clenching at his sides. "It's not that easy, I know." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Then Jungkook whispered, "I don't know how to trust you." Taehyung's chest ached at those words. And for the first time, he realized, this wasn't just about them. This was about everything Jungkook had been through. Every man who had used him, tossed him aside, treated him like nothing but a body to be desired. Taehyung wasn't supposed to be the same. He swallowed hard. "Then let me prove it to you." Jungkook blinked up at him, uncertain. How Taehyung reached out slowly, hesitantly, fingers brushing against Jungkook's. "Let me show you." And even though Jungkook should have pulled away, should have told him no, he didn't. The night was supposed to be quiet. Taehyung was supposed to take Jungkook home, let him rest, prove he wasn't just another man who wanted him for his body. But fate had other plans. As they reached Taehyung's bike, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Jungkook barely had time to react before Taehyung shoved him behind the bike, pulling out his gun. Three men stepped out from the shadows, smirking. Well, if it isn't the mighty leader of the Black Hounds," one of them sneered. "Didn't think we'd find you here, alone." Taehyung's grip on it tightened. "I'm never alone." Jungkook stayed still, his heart hammering. He wasn't stupid, he knew exactly what this was. A gang rivalry. A warning. The man in front grinned. "See, your little stunt the other night? Beating up one of our men? That didn't sit well with us." Jungkook's stomach twisted. This was about him. He was the reason Taehyung was being targeted. "Walk away," Taehyung said darkly. "Before this gets messy." The man chuckled. "Oh, I don't think we will." The moment his hand twitched to one, Taehyung fired. The street erupted in chaos. Jungkook ducked behind the bike as shots rang out, adrenaline rushing through his veins. Taehyung moved like a man who had done this before, efficient, deadly, precise. Within seconds, two of the men were down, groaning in pain. The third took one look at Taehyung's expression and ran. Taehyung didn't chase. Instead, he turned to Jungkook, grabbing his wrist. "We need to go. Now." Jungkook swallowed hard and nodded. He had always known Taehyung was dangerous. But tonight, he saw it. And for the first time, he wondered if he was in too deep. Taehyung didn't take Jungkook to his apartment. Instead, he drove them to a secluded safe house on the outskirts of town. The ride was silent. Jungkook held on to Taehyung, the scent of leathers and smoke surrounding him, but for once, it didn't bring comfort. When they arrived, Taehyung finally spoke. "Stay here." Jungkook crossed his arms. "What? Like I'm a prey?" Taehyung's eyes darkened. "Like I'm trying to keep you alive," Jungkook scoffed. "This is exactly why I told you we can't do this. Because being with you means being in this world. And I can't," he swallowed. "I can't be in this world, Taehyung." Taehyung was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, he asked, "Then why haven't you walked away?" Jungkook's breath hitched. He didn't have an answer. Because despite all of it, the danger, the fear, the chaos, he wanted Taehyung. And maybe that was the most dangerous thing of all. Jungkook sat on the edge of the worn-out couch, staring at the floor. His heart was still pounding from what had happened back at the club. Taehyung had killed for him. Or, at least, he hadn't hesitated to pull the trigger because of him. Jungkook wasn't sure how he felt about that. Across the dimly lit safe house, Taehyung leaned against a counter, arms crossed. His sharp eyes never left Jungkook, watching him like a man trying to gauge just how close he was to losing something important. "You're quiet," Taehyung finally said. Jungkook scoffed, shaking his head. "What do you want me to say? That I'm fine? That I'm used to people shooting at me?" Taehyung sighed. "I didn't mean for you to get caught up in this." "Then why did you?" Jungkook snapped, lifting his gaze to meet Taehyung's. "Why did you pull me into your world if you knew how dangerous it was?" Taehyung didn't respond immediately. His jaw tightened, fingers flexing against his forearm. "Because I can't stay away from you." Jungkook's breath hitched. "Every time I try," Taehyung continued, stepping closer, "it pulls me back." "You pull me back." Jungkook swallowed hard. "That's not fair." Taehyung's lips curled into something almost bitter. "Nothing about this is fair, Jungkook." A heavy silence settled between them. And then, Jungkook whispered, "I should leave." Taehyung's expression darkened, but he didn't stop him. "If that's what you want." Jungkook hesitated. "Did he?" He stood up slowly, his body tense. If he walked out of this safe house, he wasn't sure if he'd come back. Taehyung must have known that too. But he didn't beg. He didn't try to stop him. Instead, he watched Jungkook like he was memorizing him, as if letting him go was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Jungkook reached the door, his hand on the knob. He turned it. And then, Jungkook froze. Taehyung's voice was soft, but it carried so much weight that it nearly crushed him. "Be careful." Jungkook clenched his jaw. And without another word, he walked out. Jungkook didn't go home. He couldn't. Instead, he found himself at Cassandra's apartment, the only place he knew he could escape to. Cassandra raised an eyebrow when she opened the door. "You look like shit." Jungkook let out a dry laugh. "Thanks." She stepped aside, letting him in. "What happened?" Taehyung pissed you off again?" Jungkook sat on the couch, rubbing his face. "I left." Cassandra blinked. "Wait. For real?" Jungkook nodded, his chest tight. "I can't keep doing this, Cass. Every time I get close to him, I feel like I'm getting pulled into something I can't escape." Cassandra sat beside him, crossing her legs. "But you don't want to escape, do you?" Jungkook exhaled sharply. "That's the problem." Cassandra was quiet for a moment. Then she sighed. "Listen, I don't know much about your situation with Taehyung. But I do know that running away doesn't always mean you're free." Jungkook frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" She gave him a small, knowing smile. You can leave him, but that doesn't mean he's out of your system. And judging by the way you're sitting here looking like you lost a limb, I'd say you're already in too deep, Jungkook scowled. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Cassandra grinned. A little bit, Jungkook groaned, leaning back against the couch. He hated that she was right. Because even now, sitting here, trying to convince himself he had made the right choice, all he could think about was Taehyung. Back at the safe house, Taehyung sat in the dark, a cigarette between his fingers. Yoongi leaned against the table, watching him. So, he left. Taehyung didn't respond. Yoongi sighed. And you just let him? Taehyung took a slow drag, exhaling the smoke through his nose. What was I supposed to do? Chain him to my bed? Yoongi snorted. You thought about it, though. Taehyung shot him a glare, but Yoongi wasn't wrong. He had thought about it. He had thought about keeping Jungkook close, never letting him go, making sure no one else ever touched him. But he knew that wasn't love. That was possession. And Jungkook deserved more than that. Yoongi studied him for a moment before speaking again. You're in trouble, Tae. Taehyung flicked his cigarette into the ashtray. Tell me something I don't know. Yoongi's expression darkened. The gang that attacked you tonight? They're not done. And they know about Jungkook now. Taehyung's entire body went rigid. Yoongi leaned forward, his voice low. They're going after him. Taehyung's blood ran cold. And just like that, every thought of letting Jungkook go disappeared. Taehyung didn't hesitate. The moment Yoongi's words left his mouth, he was already grabbing his keys and his leather jacket. Where is he? Taehyung demanded, his voice like steel. Yoongi exhaled. If I had to guess, Cassandra's place. It's the only safe spot he knows besides you. That was all Taehyung needed to hear. He didn't even wait for Yoongi to finish before he stormed out, his boots echoing against the pavement as he made his way to his bike. If those boots even touched Jungkook, he clenched his jaw, shoving the thought away. No. He wouldn't let that happen. Not on his watch. Jungkook was still sitting on Cassandra's couch, lost in thought, when the first bang echoed through the apartment. Cassandra jumped. What the hell? Jungkook's body went rigid. Another bang. Then, the sound of the door being kicked open. Cassandra barely had time to react before a man in dark clothes stormed in. Jungkook's heart dropped. Oh, one of the men grabbed Cassandra, shoving her to the side. She screamed, but Jungkook barely had time to process it before rough hands seized him. Let go of me, he shouted, struggling. But they were stronger. Faster. And before he knew it, a cloth was pressed over his mouth. The world blurred. His limbs felt heavy. And the last thing he saw before everything went dark was Cassandra's terrified face. By the time Taehyung reached Cassandra's apartment, the door was wide open. His heart stopped. He rushed inside, gun drawn, but the place was empty. No Jungkook. No Cassandra. Only silence. And then, a single note, taped to the wall. Taehyung ripped it off, his eyes scanning the words. Come get him. No name. No address. Just a challenge. A warning. And a declaration of war. Taehyung's grip tightened around the paper. His jaw clenched. His entire body burned with a rage he hadn't felt in years. They wanted to play games? Fine. But they had no idea who they just with. Jungkook's head was pounding. His vision blurred as he slowly regained consciousness, the metallic scent of blood thick in the air. His wrists ached, bound tightly behind his back. His cheek was pressed against the cold concrete floor. Where? His mind was sluggish, but then it hit him. He'd been taken. The gang. Taehyung's enemies. A deep voice cut through the haze. Didn't expect you to be this pretty up close. Jungkook tensed. Footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate. A rough hand grabbed his chin, forcing him to look up. The man staring down at him had a cruel smirk, his fingers digging into Jungkook's skin. Think your biker boyfriend will come for you, the man sneered. Or do you think he'll let us have some fun first? Jungkook's stomach turned. But before he could even process the threat, boom. The door to the warehouse was blown off its hinges. Jungkook barely had time to flinch before chaos erupted. Screams. The sharp scent of burning rubber. And then, Taehyung. He stood in the smoke-filled doorway, dressed in all black. In one hand, a knife in the other. And he looked furious. The gang barely had time to react before Taehyung moved. He was a blur, swift, deadly. Shots fired, but he dodged with precision, his blade slicing through the first man's throat. Another lunged. Taehyung didn't hesitate. He grabbed the guy's wrist, twisting it until a sickening crack echoed through the warehouse. Jungkook could only watch, his heart hammering in his chest. Then, the leader, the one who had touched him, grabbed Jungkook by the hair, yanking him up. Stay back, the man growled, pressing to Jungkook's throat. Or I'll, a single. The leader's eyes widened. Blood blossomed on his forehead. And then, he collapsed. Jungkook gasped, his body trembling. And then, strong arms, pulling him close. Taehyung untied him with shaky hands, cupping Jungkook's face. Are you hurt? His voice was rough, desperate. Jungkook could barely breathe. You came for me. Taehyung's jaw clenched. Of course. Indeed, for a moment, neither of them moved. Then, Taehyung pulled Jungkook into his arms, crushing him against his chest. You're mine, Taehyung whispered, voice hoarse. No one touches what's mine. Jungkook exhaled shakily, gripping Taehyung's jacket. For the first time in his life, he felt safe. And maybe, just maybe, he was falling in love with the devil himself. Months later, Jungkook sat on the back of Taehyung's bike, arms wrapped around his waist as they rode into the night. The gang was gone. The danger had passed. But Jungkook had made his choice. He wasn't leaving. Not now. Not ever. Taehyung reached back, squeezing Jungkook's hand. And Jungkook smiled. Maybe love wasn't supposed to be perfect. But with Taehyung, it was real. And that was enough.